I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and this is my colleague, Catherine Benton. And we each have private practices where we have a focus of working with people who have chronic illnesses. And we're really very happy to be here today to talk to the caregivers because it's such meaningful work that we do, and it's even though you're dealing with a different set of problems from the person who's got the chronic illness, it's by no means less of a loss for any one of you to go through what you're going through. So we wanted to talk about that and address some of those issues. And I know that you've been through a morning, or at least an afternoon, of getting a lot of information and trying to assimilate a lot of new details. And so I would like it if you felt like this was a time where you could ask questions or be a little bit more expressive or share information with one another. I've been in a caregiving situation in the past. I'm not in that situation now, and so by no means do I feel like the expert here. You all are the experts. You all are the ones dealing with these issues day in and day out, and you have a lot of information that you could probably help one another out with by sharing what's worked for you or what has not worked for you. So I just wanted to say that before we start. Did you want to say anything else about the focus that we have? Did I forget anything about what we're doing? Do you want to say anything about living well? Because I didn't. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, Susie and I have joined together with a third colleague, Stuart Drescher, who is doing a presentation tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. Well, that's for the provider conference. Mm-hmm. I think he's doing a workshop
right now as
we speak on difficult emotions, and he's also has been working in the provider end of things, talking about the psychological dynamics of chronic illness. And the three of us have started a joint practice where we'll be offering groups and workshops to people with chronic illness and caregivers. We actually, if you're interested in finding out any more information about that, so you can have continued support between conferences, or you can just give us a business card or whatever before you leave, and we can put you on our list for contact information, because we'd like to be able to continue to offer supportive services beyond just this small presentation today. So.
Kathy and I have been doing groups together for a while, and we do groups for people who have different types of diseases, and then we also have groups for people who are support people, like most of you in this room. And my experience has been that the people who are support providers have an awful lot of very difficult to deal with emotion a lot of the times around what's going on in their family. There's a lot of very difficult feelings that come about with caregiving, and those groups that I've facilitated have tended to be every bit as intense, if not more intense sometimes, than the patient group. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I get maybe just a little small part of how difficult this can be. It can also be quite rewarding, but it's a very tough, in some ways, journey. So I just wanted to start with that. And I wanted to ask if you would consider for a minute why you think caregiving is, if you believe that it is, so stressful. There's a national survey from the National Family Caregivers Association that says 63% of the people who are in caregiving roles say that their most common feeling is stress. That's the state of mind that they identify with most of the time. 63% of the people said that. And so I'm wondering if anybody could just throw out some of the reasons why it does feel stressful. Are there any things that people are coming up with? For example, when you find yourself in a caregiving role, there are lots of new financial issues that come up between you and the person that you love, maybe?
Particularly. Go ahead, Tammy.
I was going to say, you kind of lose your partner in life, and so you're doing double duty a little bit, plus you have lost or is slipping that partnership that you used to have, so you're trying to adjust almost to a new partnership all at the same time.
Thank you. So in addition to the old roles, you've got all your old roles plus all the other person's roles, and that you're taking those on as your new roles sometimes, depending on the level of disability.
Right.
So that's a huge loss. There's also in caregiving sometimes just great physical stress. There are long hours and sometimes lifting involved and doing more than you were accustomed to in the past. A lot of times home alterations are involved so that the person with the disability can be more mobile in the home, and that in itself is a stress to have your home sort of undergoing construction. There are a lot of social changes that happen. If the person is less able or always fatigued or feeling unwell a lot of the time, then your social life is by relation going to be restricted there. And so just at the time when you need more and more affection and support from your friends, you're becoming less and less around them, more and more isolated.
And I saw you nodding. Can you identify with what she's saying?
Well, I have a number of people that I work with that are caregivers. I'm an instructor with the Arthritis Foundation, and their big thing was that they have so little time ever to themselves. It's a 24-hour, round-the-clock job.
That was a good segue. You want to talk about this part?
Which the segue is into the notion that caregivers are expected to be pretty heroic, almost a miracle worker. Or I know that in my caregiving role, I have felt like this pressure to cure the person that I'm caring for. That there a lot of guilt that I'm not able to take it away and work those miracles. So I think that fits in with what you were saying. Anybody here feel that? Or maybe you did it first and you finally gave up on that notion. But there is a cultural expectation that the caregiver is not supposed to be ill themselves, first of all. They cannot feel the same fatigue, that they're supposed to be the well ones all the time. Lots of nods around the room with that.
Were you going to ask something, Carol?
Yeah, the other thing I think is thinking that you have to solve every problem. I get a lot of people that want to do, it's like, how do I solve this? How do I take care of this? How do I, and we can't solve, as caregivers, solve all the problems.
Yeah, you're supposed to fix it.
And we'll get into this later, but that brings up a really good point. The person who's sick doesn't want you to fix it. That's actually not always welcome. It's very rarely welcome. So thanks for bringing that up. Caregivers often, because they're not the identified person who's being treated, they sometimes feel like, well, I'm supposed to be doing all of these things and do them in a cheerful way and never get burned out and always have an optimistic or pleasant attitude, and I think that that's just not realistic. If you're caregiving for someone who's very debilitated and you're not able to fix it, I think even if it's not a useful reaction, you're going to have guilt reactions sometimes. And I think if you've got someone who's no longer able to help you with what you used to do, there could be anger, because anger is an emotion that happens when something is done to you that you don't want, or something's taken from you that you want to hold on to, and illness brings about both of those. And so you're going to be angry. It's just natural and healthy that you would be angry about those kinds of things. Obviously, sadness, helplessness we've talked about. Fear is a big one. If you've loved someone all your life and it looks like they're not doing well, fear just is bound to come up. There's a new relationship in a way that's there between you now, and fear is just very hard to cope with and for some people to talk about.
What about when people get absorbed in their illness or into their own life? It's like almost like a chronic crisis, and that they're the ones the only ones that exist, and the patience and endurance that it takes to hear it over and over and over again.
Good.
And
good.
The healthy boundaries to set, when can you say, you know, this crisis has become you, not, you know.
That's a really good point. What you're talking about is someone who's getting stuck in phases 1 and phase 2 of the disease process. And if you want us to, we can just go right to that.
Yeah, why don't we segue to that for a moment?
Do you want to broadly
No, you go
overview?
ahead.
I'll do it. So the 4 phases of chronic illness, and I want to hasten to say that the 4 phases that we as caregivers would also go through in this room are crisis, stabilization, resolution, and integration. The crisis, of course, is either with the diagnosis or the onset of symptoms that are debilitating. And this is a stage when a person goes to the doctor, is desperately seeking that magic pill that's going to make them better and figure out what's wrong so they can get back to their old life. Okay, so that's the crisis. And that might last 1 year, it might last 10 years. I've seen people get stuck there even. 2, if you think about a 3-legged table becoming stabilized, it's not just a 2-legged table anymore that needs a 3rd leg, it's the 3rd leg. So they've found a doctor that they like in stabilization. They're sort of assembling their healthcare team, and they're becoming familiar with their symptoms at this stage, but there's always an attempt at stage 2 to go back to the former way of life. So between relapses, the person is still trying to do everything that they used to do. All right, and that applies for caregivers and patients. And then the resolution phase, which is Patricia Fennell, who's actually going to be speaking. Is she speaking today as well as tomorrow? Is she speaking at the patient conference?
Yes, she's actually speaking at 4:30.
Great. She's wonderful, and if you can hear her speak, she's so wonderful. She has a workbook that we use all the time with our chronic illness clients. But Patricia Fennell is the author of these phases, and she terms the 3rd phase, the resolution phase, the dark night of the soul, because this is a time when a person really does come up with the existential dilemma of, if I'm this sick, what is the point of going on? If I'm not who I used to be, who am I then? You know, and a person really can lose sight of who they are and how they fit into the world, and if they can't do what they used to do, then am I even really still me? And some people actually become suicidal at this time, or completely withdraw from their former contacts until they can feel like they can reformulate themselves. And so a person who's continually having that situation that you were talking about, where they're sort of consumed all into their symptoms, it's because I think there's a drastic impulse to go back to their former life, and they haven't gotten to this resolution phase yet. And it's no wonder, because that's the most nitty-gritty phase of all. It's just really very, very tough. But then, as Stuart Drescher was saying in the other conference this morning, once a patient gets through phase 3 and phase 3, and they go on to phase 4, they don't really go to the doctor as much anymore. They're not really looking outside of themselves, except for maintenance and ongoing sort of medical oversight. The crisis has turned into a phase of integration so that they feel more in control of their illness. They know what their limitations are.
And this isn't to say that they won't ever be in crisis again, because they may have had their illness for 20 years and have, for the most part, learned, integrated it into their sense of who they are and the way they live their life. But then something very traumatic could happen, like a death in the family, and that amount of stress can send them back into crisis, although it won't last as long. They will have the resources and the understanding of themselves that will pull them out more quickly.
Or a new symptom.
Yeah, or a new symptom could send them back into crisis.
So, but these are the phases that Patricia Fennell focuses on for patients, but I'm sure as caregivers, you can also relate to these phases, because number 1 is the crisis. You're assisting the person that you love to find support, and you yourself are also hoping to find something that's going to bring them back to their pre-illness person that they were. And then stabilization, you're sort of understanding where your resources are, who's going to help you, who's not, what friends are going to be there for you, what friends are going to let you down. I know I talk fast, I'm sorry, I'll slow down. And then resolution is where you it's not a happy thing, but you really do come to terms with what's here. and there's a realistic acceptance and integration then of what's going on. And then life can actually become extremely rewarding and enriching. A lot of people who are in stage 3 don't believe that about stage 4, but I've seen it happen over and over again. I've seen the process occur, and it's an awesome and awe-inspiring process.
So I'm wondering where you feel like, as you've been listening, have you identified where you might be, I guess, yourself as a caregiver? You won't always be in the same place as a caregiver that the person you're giving care to is. Where do you feel like you are? How many of you feel like you're at the crisis stage at this point? Anybody? Yeah? Okay.
Newly diagnosed, perhaps. Mm-hmm.
So you have a family member?
My husband.
Your husband. When was he diagnosed? How long ago?
Well, they still haven't even really diagnosed it. He's a Gulf War vet, and the military goes up to the VA, and they will not diagnose him with chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, but he exhibits all of the same symptoms as both, except for the tender points aren't as tender as they should be for fibro.
Well, when somebody won't give you a diagnosis, does that keep you stuck in crisis?
Yes, he just can't get out of it. It's going on 2 years now. We can't get
You're stuck in limbo.
beyond it.
They don't know.
So you hope,
Simple.
at that
That's tough.
stage, you often hope for a diagnosis and hope not for one.
Oh yeah, it's bad. We prayed for something to come back positive. It's terrible, you know, it just warps your way of thinking.
How about stabilization? Where you're out of crisis, but you're stabilized. You're gaining new information. You may not have really resolved that this is going to be a chronic thing, but you at least have some information. And let's see, what are some of the other things that can happen then?
You tend to perform in the way that you used to.
Oh,
and
yes.
Don't
Okay,
respect
yeah,
the
there you go.
limitations that your body is trying to.
Still in denial, okay, and
Partial.
trying to pretend that everything is the way it was. How many of you stabilization phase?
I think caregivers often get stuck there because they don't want to admit there are limits to what they can do. And
As
so,
caregivers.
It seems to me that just in our situation, there seems to be a real problem getting from the stabilization. I mean, okay, I've got it, I'm going to have to live with it, but I don't want to.
Right.
And so the difficult step is to move from the stabilization
Yes.
to the resolution that,
Yes.
okay, this is what I am, I'm going to accept that, I'm going to go on and do what I can.
Yeah. There's
And
this.
as a caregiver, it's hard for us, it seems, to push them over the edge into accepting the way things are and going on from there, and then making it a positive thing, as positive as you can from there on out.
So your question is, how do I, as a caregiver, help them to move forward in these phases? That's a good
More
question.
statement than a question, really. But,
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Does anybody have any
I think
ideas?
there's times where we as caregivers can't do anything about that, because
That's right.
we can't reach a resolution until the old party reaches a resolution. And if they never make that change, we're never going to make that change.
Do you think so? I mean, are they that closely tied together that you need to be in the same stage as the person you're
To a
caregiving?
degree, I think he's right, because with my wife, the thing changes on a daily basis. It's never the same, and it's hard for her to get to a point to where a certain set of symptoms she knows she's going to have to live with, because the symptoms change. And it makes it harder for me to live with it, because she doesn't know what to expect on a daily basis.
How long has she been with
Only 5 years.
it? And it's still changing every day.
It's changing.
That's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Is that it can change not only every day, but hour by hour, the symptoms that a person feels. And one of the tools that I like to give to couples is to ask them to write a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being they're feeling their best and can do the most, and 1 being I'm so sick I have to be in bed all day and I can't even lift a finger, much less answer the telephone or anything else that might be required of me today. And to really have each couple individually figure out what 0 means, what 10 means, what 5 means. And so there's not only a list of signs and symptoms of being sick, but what that means. You know, if I'm at a 5, that means I want you to leave me alone all day, you know. But for another couple of 5 might mean I want you to sit by me and hold my hand all day. So it needs to be very specific, but I would really encourage couples, or if you're working with someone very closely every day, to just make a list, 1 to 10, and say, where are you, honey, today? And if they say a 2, that's your shorthand, and they don't have to describe their symptoms over and over, because I think patients often feel guilty about saying the same thing over and over. But to say, I'm a 2, sweetie pie, you know, that's a whole lot easier.
Yeah, but there's a problem there too.
Tell me. Tell me.
If they have gone a week, or in some cases 1 day or 2 days, and you get up with them that next day, and they say, oh wow, the good day was yesterday. Well, what are you going to do? I have a hard time with that, because I go from bad to worse. There isn't any good days. There's just some that might be
That's
slightly
right.
better than the other.
That's
and they're
right.
not even recognizable until you're in a bad day again.
That's right. It's so discouraging. It's so discouraging. Yes.
The problem I have is with the resolution part, as we get there, then a family member, it says, oh, look, I ran into so-and-so, and their daughter had this exact same thing, and they took this, and they're better.
Oh, yes.
I agree.
And so then now you're back to...
What does that do to you?
Well, then you're thinking, well...
Did I do all I could?
We come to all these places in here that there's no magic pill. But now you're back, okay, now I feel like the train has just run off the track. Now you've got family members, you're trying to say, well, no, that isn't really. But then, well, if you don't do it, then you're bad for not trying it out.
In your mind or in their mind?
Both, probably.
Both. I think one of the most important things caregivers can do is learn to trust their instincts and put on blinders when well-meaning people try to sidetrack you like that, because they're not trying to sidetrack you, they're trying to help.
They're well-meaning,
but they're helpless from afar, and they're not in your shoes. And you as the caregiver, it's like mothering, or fathering. You need to be able to trust your instincts, know that you know what's best for your child. And the same with caregiving, you need to know that you know what's best for that person that you love, because you're the closest to them. And if someone else says, I found this miracle cure on the internet, you can thank them and not be swayed. And that takes practice, and it
takes courage.
And it takes courage to go against the... And that's where support comes in, because I guarantee you, if you came in and you talked to a room like this of people and you explained your dilemma about your cousin or so-and-so who wants to introduce this new treatment, I'm sure that a group of caregivers like this would say, oh, well, you should go try that. They won't do that to you. Mm-hmm. They'll say, you need to do what you need to do that's best for your family. So support is vital. You know, you need to talk with other people who are on the same journey as much as possible, and if that's a close friend at church, that's great. A support group is great. Things like this, I think, are wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity. And then if it's just so isolating for you and you are just really pretty much stuck at home, you can go online if you've got a computer. This is the best website I found. I did some searching yesterday, and this one seems to me to have the most credibility and the best advice and the nicest articles. So they have chat rooms, and they have articles, and they have tips and steps on how to care for your loved one. They have all kinds of resources for getting food delivered, and national contacts will then route you to local contacts. So check it out and you might be surprised how many ways that you might get support on this website, and their phone numbers there too.
How do you negotiate with the patient where you're moving from stabilization into a resolution here, where the patient certainly knows certain activities are going to be bad for, and the support person, myself, knows that those are bad.
And they're overdoing.
They are overdoing. She knows they're bad for her. She knows it puts her in great pain. I'm available to help, and yet it persists. So all it does is result in conflict.
I would own your own feelings. If I were you, I would own my own feelings instead of showing her how much I care. In other words, I would say, when you overdo, it scares me. If it scares you. When you overdo, it makes me mad. So own that. I think a lot of times we say we can't show our anger to the person that we love because that's not optimistic, that's not supportive, that's not a good caregiver. We have to be always optimistic and supportive and so forth. But I think that you cheat your loved one a little bit if you don't let her know how you feel. Because if
well,
my husband,
let her know how I feel, but by the same token, I'm available, I'm close at hand, and yet she doesn't ask of me.
You want her to.
I do. And I don't know how much clearer I can make it to her. We both know the consequences of the overdoing, of things that she shouldn't be doing or trying to do.
It seems like you've reached resolution, but she hasn't quite got there.
That does, doesn't it?
And I think you can drift back and forth. I think that this lady is trying to find an answer. And if somebody down the street's got an idea, man, think about it. You know, don't write it off. Think about it. Because you have to. I mean, if you can find find an answer somewhere, and there's a lot more wrong answers than there is right. But you got to listen to everybody. You got to try. You know, like this gentleman, it's frustrating, but you got to try. Or and not necessarily, go for the hocus pocus and drink this and, hold this over your head and so on and whatever. But,
right.
But logically, if somebody's got an idea.
But it tends to take you back from resolution into the stabilization stage.
I think the whole process is once crisis, maybe you can set on crisis, but after that, you're back and forth all the time, it seems like to me.
Yeah, this is not a linear process. Right. You're constantly cycling through these. But the more that you can get into integration and visit that and get further along, the faster you're going to get into a wellness space, a place of, not this kind of neurotic, being stuck in crisis and stabilization, which is a very painful place to be, an exhausting place to be.
But what you're talking about, though, is that your wife is, or I assume your wife, is doing this in a way that you'd rather see her do it in a different way that would actually be easier for both you and for her. And she's not doing that. And that is a huge deal. I work with people, for example, with cancer sometimes who opt not to pursue any more treatment and their partners are devastated. But when I work with those partners, it always comes about that you have to respect the person's wishes. In the end, how they do this disease is up to them. We can only have input. And so there might be some things which are keeping her from accepting your help that could be worked through. But in the end, we really don't have control, and there really isn't any specific way that we can get them to accept our help if they won't take it. It's their own journey. Yes?
I tend to have difficulty with the frustration that I feel with my daughter, who is an adult, doesn't live with me, but the frustration is she knows what she should do, but she doesn't bother to do it half the time. And then complains and whines and she doesn't feel so good. And it's hard for me to not be the mother and say, well, you should eat your good food or go to bed at a decent hour or whatever. It's hard for me then to feel sympathetic to her the way I would like to do and give support, because I tend to feel, hey,
you do your part and I'll do my part.
The benefit or not of what you're doing, and I can't solve it for you, but it's terribly frustrating for the mother to see their child not function. And some of it, I know maybe she does all she can, and it still wouldn't be any better. But when I can see clear evidence of stuff she does that self-sabotages, it's hard to feel the same good feelings. I feel like, hey, is there a way way to deal with that would help?
Again, there's nothing that we can do to encourage them, except to encourage them to have better self-care. So the answer actually lies in our response, which is, how am I going to respond? And it's always about boundaries. I think we must have better boundaries for ourselves. If someone isn't taking as best care of themselves as they can, as herself as she can, then it's up to us to say, well, honey, I'm so sorry you're sick, but you can't call me at 12 o'clock midnight. I'm not going to be available anymore to do that. And so we really need to find ways to make our lives sane, because you're not going to be any good to her if you're all burned out and if resentment is allowed to build up. And the only way to take care of that is to take good care of yourself. Figure out what buttons get pushed, and then make some decisions to take care of yourself better, perhaps.
Well, and I'd like to refer to what you said a moment ago and reiterate it, letting them know how it affects you. Because you can own that, and that is, they need to hear that the choices they make in their life have an effect not just on them, but on the people around them who love them.
I mean, like actually, and I've done this, but to find a good way to do it, to say, when you don't do that, it really concerns me, because I know you'd like to feel better, and I'd like you to feel better, but it upsets me that you don't do what you can.
I'm worried you'll be sick, and when you're sick, I'm afraid.
Sure. Okay, that's.
It seems to me, and back to what we were saying here, a moment ago you said that we need to take ownership of our feelings as we're relating to the person we're caring for. It also seems that we need to allow them to own their feelings.
Yes.
I'm a fixer, and maybe it's a guy thing, I don't know, but us guys always want to go in and fix it. You're sick? Okay, well, let's put you to bed. Let's, whatever it is, let's just fix it. We'll take care of that. It won't be a problem anymore.
Put your feet up.
Yeah, whatever. But it seems to me if our family member, our loved one, does not want to accept our help, that's fine. We shouldn't feel guilty about that. We should allow them to own that feeling. And if they want to be miserable, cool, be miserable. That's your decision.
Yeah, they're grown up, and they'll figure out the consequences for themselves and decide those for themselves.
Well, and I've always argued if the pain of whatever, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, whatever, gets too great, then you'll change. At some point, a crisis, when the pain gets too great, you'll go see the doctor. Until it's too great, you won't. When the pain of doing too much gets too great, then you'll quit doing too much.
Well, I think you just exactly encapsulated maybe what your wife is doing, which is the emotional pain of asking you is greater than the physical pain that she would experience if she didn't. Perhaps. So I think you just summed it up really well. And we just have to respect that that's maybe where they are.
One thing, is it a fair thing to ask them, what is it that you feel about asking me to help, or what is it that you gain from not asking?
What keeps you from
because
asking?
It uses the savings in the bank that I would like to spend time with you other places. I think that's the hardest thing for me to comprehend is
what keeps you from receiving help. Good.
I also think that's a segue into the whole notion of active listening and deep listening that none of us in our culture are very good at. We were never taught how to deeply listen to another person and understand them.
And acknowledge worry.
And it's difficult to ask for help when you're afraid the other person's going to jump in and fix. Or if you just want to let someone know how you feel and they try to jump in and make you feel differently or say, no, you don't really feel that way. Or it makes you anxious to hear their emotions. And so developing the ability to truly listen and understand the other's position without responding in a fix it or let's change that way, just to understand the other person. And it goes both ways. And if you feel as though you need to be understood, you can ask that person for some deep listening. And that's kind of a whole workshop in itself.
Yeah.
Is how to develop those deep, active listening skills.
Just yesterday I had a couple, the woman with fibromyalgia and her husband who is a fixer. Just a really lovely and sweet and good-natured man. And she is having so much pain but doesn't tell him, because when she does, he almost gets angry with her because she hasn't gone to the doctor, she hasn't taken steps to do as much as she possibly could, but she doesn't go to the doctor because she's already tried that many times, and it's just not been productive for her. She's tried every medication, she's tried every therapy, and her pain just persists. And so she doesn't talk to him anymore about her pain, and he feels cut out. And so they were sitting in my office yesterday, and I said, so what do you want from your husband when you tell him that you hurt? You know, let's just say that you could go ahead and tell him that you hurt. And she just became overwhelmed and tearful and said, I just want him to put his hand on my leg where it hurts, because when he puts his hand there, it makes me feel so much better. And I said, why? And she said, because then I'm not alone, and he's not angry with me, he's angry with the disease with me. So to be angry together against the disease is so much more productive than being angry because the patient won't help herself. All right? Yes.
I guess this is backtracking a little bit.
It's okay. I want you to feel like you can jump in.
Well, this whole several hours has been, I guess, a thump in the head that I should have had with a baseball bat a long time ago, because I saw it in other people, but I didn't recognize it until today. There's actually two groups of us. Fortunately, the main group, I think, is right here in this room. Of all the people that were down there, maybe, 300 to 400 people down there, and we've got maybe 20 of them in this room that, first of all, recognize that there's a problem and want to find a way to deal with it. The people I feel sorry for are the other, I don't know, 99% of the people in that room down there, that the disease, whichever one it is, or a variety of other diseases, came on gradually enough that the supposed caregiver doesn't even want to recognize that there's a problem, and worse than the doctors. And fortunately, at least for me, this happened all of a sudden 5 years ago, and I knew there was a problem. And it hurt. And it hurt me just about as much as it did her. And I feel, I've got mixed feelings with the part that I can't really fix it, because I'm a fix-it person. If the problem gets big enough, you deal with it. If it doesn't, you push it in the back until it either does or goes away. And this is a problem that's huge, and I can't do anything about it. But what about the rest of those people that I see out there that, well, so I'm looking at it from a man's point of view, but all those women out there that hurt, that can't even get somebody to recognize that they have a true problem.
Right. And it's interesting because you mentioned two cultural or gender role problems. Women are sometimes seen as invisible culturally, and, you know, hysterical and that kind of thing, right? And so
I would have been one of those people if it would have happened that way. You know, this would have been a gradual thing.
Right.
You would have disbelief.
I probably would have been one of those brain.
Right, and the men are the fix-it ones, you know. So if you're giving me a problem that doesn't have, you know, if I can't put this bolt on this place and, you know, build it into something that makes sense, then it brings up that anxiety of, you know, well, I'm not doing it right as a male. You know, I should be able to do this. And so there's a lot of gender and cultural stuff that's mixed in with all of the caregiving dynamics.
Another dynamic that happens if you love someone a lot is that when they suffer and you can't fix it, sometimes your brain will play tricks on you, and then it will say things to you like, well, she must be faking it. And that's not because we're bad people that we say, oh, they must not be in as much pain as they say. It's because we want to buffer ourselves from that kind of pain, and it's easier to think someone's malingering or a hypochondriac than it is to think that there really could be that sick. And I'm going to tell you, I work with people all the time who have chronic illness. That's almost all I do. And I have this lovely group of people who are in my MS group. Kathy and I did this group together for a while. And one of the people, a young, beautiful woman, came into group and had a very tough time with stuttering because of her MS. Just, you know, that's one of the symptoms of the MS. And then, lo and behold, a week later, another young, beautiful woman came in with exactly the same symptom. And my first reaction is, she's putting me on. And then I got so sad because I realized she's so sick, and my first reaction was not to believe her. You know, and there's no opportunity in a group like that to malinger. There's none whatsoever, and I know that in my head, but my first instinct was not to believe her. And that's what I do for a living. So I know a lot of caregivers do. I just know they do. I know that a lot of people don't believe that there's as much suffering as they're seeing. And it's just a way to cope with something so sad. That's just natural and human. Forgive yourself if you don't believe it sometimes, but then try to catch yourself and say, it's because I'm sad. Yes.
I find that it isn't as much, it's my son is the one who has the illness, that our family doesn't. It's the outsiders that see these people because they don't look sick.
Well, they only see them when they look well enough to go out.
Yes, because they don't go out normally.
Right.
And we've heard from, after the fact, from other relatives or for somebody that he's not sick, and it just hurts so much. It just tears you apart. But it's usually the outsiders, I think, that don't believe they're sick.
Well, sometimes it's the very closest family member.
It could be that too.
Sometimes it's the husband or
We've
the...
been doing this for 8 years, so it's like, you know.
Yep.
Well, somebody, I think it was you, Tammy, that said earlier about, you know, when people are stuck in this circle, you'll hear a lot of complaining, and you wonder, it really can't be that bad. You start to wonder if it's attention seeking. And in some ways, maybe their vocalizing is a way, please pay attention to this because I'm in this and no one is helping me or hearing me. And so it's a way for them to call for help. And they don't know how to use a support system. They don't know how to talk to their doctors. They don't know how to talk to you.
You know, I've often thought to myself, if I was the one that was stuck in bed, or I was the one with such limitations, what would I be thinking about all day, and what would I be verbalizing when somebody came home from work or picked up the phone and called me to say, you know, and you know, how are you doing? Well, you know, I have this pain and I'm so this and I'm blah, 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 blah. But it's like the same conversations, and you so much want to say to them, you're so much more than that. Are you taking your meds? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Then, you know, and then you want to move on to that wonderful person that they really are. Without all the physical capabilities, they still have so much more to offer. And go back to talking about that, but somehow it's like that's not a part of them anymore, and they just want to, and then you don't really want to be around them. That it's, you know, you want to because you love them and you care about them, but I end up feeling guilty because that has become them, you know, and you want to say, you know, you are so much more, and you try and take them out and, you know, do things with them to show, you know, all the things that their self-value and worth without. I mean, you can understand them when they stutter. You can understand them when they, you know, have to walk slow or something, you know. But it's so much more than that. And, you know, I love the word stabilization until you said it's not really stable.
Yeah.
You blew that for me, Kathy.
Oh, well. What's so stable about stabilization?
And then it just keeps moving. I thought, God, maybe when you get to that point, you're pretty steady there. But you're right. Yeah. You know, that's just the first bridge to other things, and it doesn't stop.
We're out of time, but what if we took 5 more minutes to talk about some things? Is that not possible? Okay.
I guess Stuart's talk ended up running 15 minutes late for equipment failure problems. So we've asked you can either use another 15 minutes and continue talking, or if people want to leave and just get a little longer break in between the talks, they need to be quiet outside. It's not just.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
That's the choice. You guys can choose what you want to do.
Let's talk about active listening to the person. If you've got a person in your life who really is stuck with focusing on the symptoms, and really it feels like they're complaining to you, and that's very difficult, that's very tedious, that's very hard to be with, it's not pleasant. However, there's nothing that we can do to move them along except meet them right exactly where they are. So if they're stuck in the symptoms, if they're stuck in the pain, if they're stuck in I can't, the most helpful thing to do is not to resist them in that stuck place, but to join them in the stuck place. And so to say something along the lines of, you're in so much pain, what hurts the most? Just go for the jugular. You're in so much pain, or what are you most worried about? So what are you afraid all of this disability means for you? You know, are you afraid that you're going to die? You know, go right there.
Open it.
Go right there, because you can't pull them out of the hole. You have to get down into the hole with them. And if you're willing to get down in the hole with them, it'll be a lot more meaningful for you, and you'll be able to actually communicate with them. Okay? So let me go through on this slide. It says well-meaning, blah blah blah. It says well-meaning but not often helpful remarks to people. And forgive me, it has MS
on page 4
here, because I did this for an MS workshop and I forgot to fix it. But let me ask you to just let this sink in. I'm going to be a well-meaning but not helpful neighbor, and I'm going to come over to you or your family member and I'm going to say, my son-in-law has MS or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, and he's doing just great now. What does that make you feel like?
Yeah.
You're lucky.
That you're not doing it right?
You're guilty. You're guilty.
Guilty? Because?
Envious.
Yeah, I mean, and I get all of these comments from my group members. I didn't just make these up. These are all things that people have said have not helped them. In fact, they've made them feel more alone. And the reason why is, if he can do it, then I should be able to do it too. And something about the way I'm doing this disease must be wrong. And so other people out there are doing a better job than I am, and I'm just a lousy patient. So, you know, I think we often say these things almost to reassure our own selves and not to really make the other person feel better. It's a way of sort of reassuring ourselves that we're being polite and friendly, but we're not really being with them. Like I said, we're not really crawling down in that hole with them, are we? So the other thing is, how are you? You look great. How are you is a loss for people with chronic illness. They can no longer hear those 3 words anymore in the same way that well people can. If someone comes up to you and you have a chronic illness, or they ask how your chronically ill wife or husband is, you don't know if they want you to say fine, or if they really want you to tell them the answer for that day. So that's a loss. And so what I do with my clients is I usually say, it's nice to see you, because it is. I don't say, how are you? And if I do, I cringe at myself, because I know that's a loss for them. So, and nice to see you actually feels more genuine to me, because I mean it, you know? It's not just a pleasantry. And then if you have to say how great they look, because sometimes they look awesome, you need to say, on the outside you look like a 10, how do you feel on the inside? Does it match? You know, does the way you feel on the inside match how you're feeling on the outside? Because you look amazing, you know? The thing is, if someone says, oh, you don't look, I mean, you look so great, then the person often feels like they're not believed, they're malingering, they're a hypochondriac. So if people are thinking, you know, I'm just putting on, then I start to have this dilemma in my head. If I'm a sick person, well, am I sick or am I crazy? You know, it's very tough sometimes for people to differentiate. Well, maybe I really am a hypochondriac. A lot of people, even after they've been diagnosed maybe for 10 years, say, oh, I just had like this weekend where I thought, well, maybe I don't really have this disease. You know, and so am I sick or am I crazy is something that a lot of people struggle with over a long period of time. And then keep thinking positive. I know you can pull through this. I think that's very tough to hear over and over and over again if you're a sick person, because it means you're in control of your disease progression, and if you don't get it better, it's your own fault. And they've already got enough to deal with without adding that onto their plate.
I ask a question? It isn't necessarily related to that, but we've got 3 kids. My son is a physical therapist. He's got a little bit of medical training because of that. And he's the one that tends to call up and say, how's Mom? What can I do to help? I have no answer for that because I don't know what he can do to help. There doesn't seem to be anything we can do to fix it. I don't know what you heard. I heard down there that it's just there. It's not going to get better. It probably isn't getting a lot worse other than other age-related things that impact on it. So it is. I mean, it just is. What can we tell him? I mean, it's hard for, and I notice that most of us are more experienced people.
He would be so great. He would be so grateful.
grateful.
He would be so grateful to you if you would give him a tiny, no matter how, task.
Yeah.
Like clean out your garage. Anything would make him feel worlds better. My sister just got cancer, and my brother allowed me to babysit their kids, and I was so grateful to have something I could do. So grateful. Because if they wouldn't let me do that, then I'd feel just useless, and that they didn't want me to help, and so it's a great gift if you can give your son some task.
Well,
let him paint your house or anything.
What I would like to tell him most of all is just understand.
Yeah.
Grandma can't do what she used to do. She can't come babysit your kids anymore. We can't have the kids up there for 3 or 4 hours. We love to see them, bring them up, see us, go home.
Well, could you
but they
bring
don't
up-
understand. A lot of times our children
Yeah.
or other family members don't understand the impact of a visit or some of these things have. And so I don't know.
So maybe what you could do for starters is to say, watch this video on chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. Educate yourself so that I don't have to do that for you.
What would you recommend to take for that?
Yeah, there's a really good one downstairs, the fibromyalgia, the chronic fatigue. What's it called, Carol?
I Remember Me.
I Remember Me. I guess they have them for sale down there.
I don't know, I haven't.
But it's really, really good. I guess, can you get it through the offer website? I Remember
We
Me?
don't have it, it's actually through the CEIPS organization.
Okay.
Through the CEIPS organization. That website, if I'm quoting it correctly, hopefully I am, it's cfids.org.
Do you think just like that your son calls you periodically is a wonderful show of support? I mean, I have had to ask some people just call me every now and then to check in on how we're doing, and they've done that. And just because that's one of the problems with chronic illness, people forget about you over
Yes.
time. And just to know that, okay, you remember me, you care about us
Well,
still.
In that case, he's very, very good.
So that's
And
it's just to want to know. That's helpful.
His specialty is older people. That's just kind of who he's worked with. So he's worked with a lot of chronically ill people. So he's really good that way. That's not
Could
an
he
issue.
just ask your wife too, talk directly to her and ask her, what can I do to help? The two of them figure it out a little bit.
Can he come sit with her while you go somewhere or go fishing or?
I feel like an imposter because she's not debilitated. I mean, she doesn't have the energy. She aches all the time, but she's not bedridden.
Right.
I'm not having to carry her anywhere. If she had to get up and go and do something, she can. It's just she pays for it. I mean, obviously, like all of
That's a
them do.
loss. That's a
But
big
if
loss.
she has to go to a social event or if she has to do something,
But she
can do
pays.
that. But
She has to
she's
save
gonna pay for
energy
it.
and then pay
So
for it later.
I'm fortunate. I don't have.
Yeah.
She's not completely laid up.
No, I think you're
She's
more.
here. I mean,
I think you're more typical situation than you might think. Yeah. I don't think most people are here because someone that they love is bedridden, right? It's a little bit more out.
How are we
and
doing,
about.
Carol, on time?
Actually, it's just a little before 4:30, so you can go another 15 minutes if we have.
Oh, okay.
It's up to you.
There's another class scheduled in here.
I see.
Well, actually, what happened is we had some electronic problems in one of the other workshops, which made that one 15 minutes late. So, in order to get you won't be able to get into that particular one until after the
4:45?
Yeah. So,
All right. And is there supposed to be a 15-minute break in between or not?
we just
No? Oh, okay. All right. Because there are several more questions and I want to be able to get to people, so.
I would just try to address one that nobody really ever, or nobody said anything about getting here. I just kind of wondered what was affecting my work, and I think it's blame it on the fact that I get pneumonia virtually every winter. One of these times I'm going to die from it, but I blame that for problems that occurred over the last 3 or 4 years. I've been taking, well, I guess I got hit with another baseball bat down there this afternoon because of reading through some of the materials here. I realize now that what was affecting my work wasn't anything to do with pneumonia or being sick anywhere or anything. It was the fact that all of a sudden my wife had a problem, and my people at work kind of joke about, not me, but other guys that have lost interest in their job, lost interest in a particular thing they're doing, and I've lost interest. And it's embarrassing me, it's embarrassing to me to even have to talk to my boss sometimes, because I know he's covering for me. My people I work with are covering for me, whether they know it or not. They're picking up the slack because I've lost interest. I don't pay attention to what's going on anymore. I used to jump up in the morning and work until dark and be really upset if the job wasn't done. And now I care less.
You're losing your motivation.
How does a person get out of that mode? Because I know it isn't helping my wife, it's not helping me.
Yeah. Well, the first step is what you've just done, is to acknowledge what you're saying about yourself. What you're talking about probably is that what we used to call burnout, but you're fatigued by the compassion, probably. You've been worrying and worrying and worrying, and it's caught up with you. And that does manifest itself in a lot of different ways. Let me just read these out to you, because there might be 1 or 2 things that you didn't really identify as being part of compassion fatigue. But listen to these and see if any of these are things that you've been experiencing as a caregiver. You don't get out much anymore. You argue with the person that you care for. You have conflicts with other family members. You self-medicate, maybe use alcohol or pills to relax yourself. Your appetite changes, either you eat more or less than you're accustomed to. You isolate yourself. You behave compulsively or are overly focused on minor details. You feel listless and lack energy. You feel angry, anxious, or more worried than usual. You have a difficult time controlling emotions. You have a hard time concentrating. You have physical symptoms of anxiety, such as an upset stomach, headaches, or racing heart. You become forgetful. You become clumsy or accident prone. You lose your motivation. You have self-destructive or even suicidal thoughts. You sleep more or less than usual. You never get enough rest, and you feel guilty. And these aren't things that I just pulled up out of my head. These are things that are signs and symptoms of people who've been caregiving for too long without taking good care of themselves. These are things that happen. And if you were being cared for by someone, would you want someone like this taking care of you? I wouldn't. I would want someone who was happy and had a balanced life and who felt good about him or herself and who had good boundaries with me, so I knew exactly how much to expect and how little to expect. You know, I would want my caregiver to say no to me from time to time, so I would feel safe in any requests that I made, that I wasn't going to actually ask for so much one day that they would be resentful. I would want a caregiver who took care of him or herself. And so if you notice these things, it's important to recognize them and then seek the kind of help that will take care of them. You know, and if you don't know how to get started, just ask me. We can talk about some other links to different kinds of supports, but there are workshops, there are classes, there are groups. I think if you were in a support group, that might take care of a great deal of these kinds of issues. And you don't need to do it in person, you can do it online, although I would suggest in person as being a lot more gratifying and helpful to you more immediately.
Could I ask just one quick question? And that's with the symptoms you have and whatever, you know, very realistic, but just a yes or no. Is there anything in this life you think you could get enthusiastic about? You know what I mean? Or is it total despair? Or yes, is it total despair?
Oh no, I've got some other things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
You're just surprised by your lack of motivation.
In fact, it's a little strange because I can go to work and it seems like I sit at my desk and I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, but I
feel
just don't produce. And yet somebody will call and want me to go for a job and I'm up and gone, and when that happens, everything's go. But as long as I go from home to the shop, office, I have a hard time.
It sounds like you're distracted, and that's what stress does to us. It helps, I mean, it makes us lose our focus. It makes making decisions more difficult. When you're under stress, when you're in distress, it makes you feel like you have fog in your head sometimes, and it just really does feel like it's hard to pull together a decision or become motivated for any kind of task. So that just sounds like stress to me. And like I said at the beginning, stress is the most common feeling that caregivers experience.
And just like you would want your loved one to take better care of themselves and take responsibility for that self-care, it's important for you to take the responsibility yourself for your own self-care. It's just like owning feelings, owning your own self-care.
But does that not happen until you reach resolution? Or, I mean, do you get some of that when you're in stabilization? Or when does that start to happen?
The self-care?
No.
For either?
Where you can get rid of the feelings that you're talking about now. Does that go away? I guess I'm asking you. It takes a long time.
Well, I think the better that you get at managing yourself as a caregiver, and the better that a person who has the illness gets at managing their own symptoms and taking care of themselves, the more you get out of these first couple of phases and get into integration. It's not a caregiving in order to get rid of the disease. It's a caregiving of integration. It's how can I be as well as possible, given my limitations and given that I have this thing. Rather than going to a whole night at the opera because you love opera and you can't stand not to do it even though you know you're fatigued. Go for 15 minutes of it and leave. You know, so, and the same goes for caregivers. It's about allowing yourself to do things that give you pleasure and not being so caught up in your role as caregiver, but remember that you're a person with needs too, and to make space for that in your life. And it's a conscious effort. It's an existential dilemma. And it takes courage and it takes guts. So I don't think that anything that we're talking about are easy tasks. But it takes awareness. It takes a decision that you're going to consciously work toward that integration and not allow yourself to be stuck there anymore. And it takes communication with each other. It's acknowledging the feelings and being with each other where you are together.